We need somebody to come to the microphone. You want somebody else to make an appearance? Is that what
Yes,
you said? Okay, no worries. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Brianna Switzler, bar number 15653.
Okay. Same thing.
That's it.
Welcome.
Thank you.
But if she's going to be speaking, then we need to put her near a microphone.
I'll just be,
Hold on a second. Thank you.
I'll just be taking one of the witnesses, Your Honor, so I'll just.
Oh, you'll come up for it. Okay, no worries. It's the same thing. We just need to make sure everyone is up to be heard. That's just what we're trying to do. Give you all a chance. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Yes, Your Honor, plaintiffs will call Dr. Issam Najm.
Okay, thank you. Marshall, can you assist the witness?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Butler, is that on?
Raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and no pains and penalty of perjury?
I do.
Can we have a seat and please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Issam Najm, I-S-S-A-M-N-A-J-M.
Counsel, feel free to proceed with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Dr. Najm, can you please summarize your education and experience for the jury?
Sure. As I mentioned, my name is Issam Najm. I'm an environmental engineer.
Oh, Dr. Najm.
Friendly reminder, and you may have, you need to make sure that microphone is nice and close to you, and when you start turning around other locations, then you need to turn the microphone with you, because if you turn around and we can't hear you, we just want to make sure there's a nice clear record. So usually we just ask you that you be speaking nicely in the microphone and not sitting back in the comfy chair. Okay? Appreciate it. Thanks so
All right,
much. So
thank
you can
you.
hear everything. Thank you.
I am an environmental engineer, which is part of civil engineering. I have 30 years of experience, well, more than 30 years now, working in water chemistry and drinking water treatment, and that is the field that I specialize in. I hold a master's and a doctorate degrees in environmental engineering from the University of Illinois, and I have an appointment as an adjunct associate professor of civil environmental engineering at UCLA. And I also have a certification, board certification as an environmental engineer, and I'm a registered professional civil engineer in the state of California.
Dr. Najm, do you have experience related to the formation of hydrazine in water?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury a little bit about that experience?
Yes. I have conducted research on the formation of hydrazine in water. We were contracted by the Water Research Foundation, which is a research foundation located in Denver, to explore the formation of hydrazine. And we conducted two main research projects, one in 2006 and one in 2011 on the formation of hydrazine.
And generally, what did those studies entail?
These studies at the time were looking at whether hydrazine can be formed in a drinking water treatment system, mainly from a municipal drinking water side. And a lot of the work was done actually about trying to quantify, that means try to measure hydrazine at different concentrations in water.
Dr. Najm, what is hydrazine?
Hydrazine is a fairly simple chemical, and we say simple compared to other complex chemicals. And you saw the slide before, but it's basically two nitrogens with two hydrogens on each nitrogen. So in spite of its simplicity, it is a It is a very significant chemical, mainly as an industrial chemical. It is a chemical that is been in production since the beginning of the last century. And it is used very much, even now, in the space technology world, because hydrazine is what we call a propellant. That means when you ignite it, it generates a massive amounts of gas, and so it's used to propel, and it's actually still used as a propellant for satellites and space station components as well.
Is hydrazine a toxic chemical?
Hydrazine is very much a toxic chemical, yes.
Is hydrazine associated with liver damage?
It is my understanding that it is a liver toxin. However, I'm not a medical expert.
Dr. Najm, can you tell the jury what were you asked to do in this case?
I was specifically asked to address 3 questions. The first one was knowing that hydrazine was measured in the products that's generated at Real Water. Is there a way to explain how it came about to be in those products?
And what is your understanding about the hydrazine being found in the Real Water product?
My understanding is that the CDC and the FDA, and that's the Center for Disease Control and the Food and Drug Administration, conducted an investigation after the reports of the illnesses that occurred, and specifically that there were 3 samples of the products, or at least the concentrate that we'll talk about, that had significant levels of hydrazine in them.
And let's look at the 3 primary questions that you were asked to investigate in this case on the screen. Are those the questions that you were asked to look at?
Yes, it is. Yes, they are.
And we'll get into them one by one in a few minutes. But first, I would like to ask generally, how did you go about investigating the first question, which is, based on the information provided, is there anything in the Real Water production process that can explain how hydrazine could be present in the E2 concentrate?
So I received documents and materials, testimonies, depositions, and I read what was in them. I looked at papers that were from the facility and tried to read them and understand how they produced this product, and ultimately form my opinion about what may have happened.
Can you tell the jury what you found?
Yes. If we may, please.
Shane, next slide, please.
So in my analysis, I generated this chart to paint the entire picture. And I'm going to go in detail into this so that I can explain what I surmised happened and how hydrazine was formed.
Dr. Najm, this diagram is Exhibit 21. It's been stipulated to be admitted as evidence in this case. You were here for Mr. Love's opening statement, correct?
I don't know his name, but I'll assume you referred to the counsel.
Counsel for Real Water, yes, sir. Did Mr. Love use this diagram in his opening statement?
I did see it in the opening statement, yes.
Did you create this diagram that was used by Real Water in their opening statement?
I created this diagram, yes.
Did you create it yourself based on the information you reviewed, or did you copy this diagram from something in Real Water's files?
No, I drew up this diagram as an explanation in my report. So this is my product.
In your review of the materials from Real Water, did you find anything similar to this diagram and anything that Real Water had?
No, I did not.
So you had to create the diagram of the Real Water manufacturing process, is that right?
That's what I did for develop my understanding, yes.
And Dr. Najm, can you please walk the jury through and help them understand the manufacturing process at Real Water?
Yes. I'm going to try to go through this. Let's see. Okay. It's a stepwise process, so I'm going to go from step 1 to 3 and 4, is the way I have it charted here. So in step 1, tap water is taken from the system and runs through a filtration system. And that filtration system, for example, that photograph on top, that's the blue material, that is the filtration system that they use to filter the tap water to generate what we refer to as purified water. And that purified water was collected. You see those tanks at the bottom. Those are holding tanks, containers for that purified water. And that's when, from there, it would be pumped into the next room where the production took place. So in that first step up there, what you see is they fill a tank with 300 gallons, and I believe these are pictures of those tanks on top, on the inside room.
Dr. Najm, before we move on, just for the record and so the jury understands what we're looking at, the steps you're referring to are Exhibit 21, and the picture of the filtration system was Exhibit 236, and the picture of the holding tanks was Exhibit 233. And to avoid any other interruptions, if you could reference the exhibits on the pictures, just so the jury understands what they are and we have a clear record of those exhibits.
Okay. My apology. Next is the photos. You see a photo on top, Exhibit 245. Those are the two 300-gallon tanks. So they would fill them with this purified water that just went through filtration, and they would add this KCl, that's potassium chloride. It's a salt, as I was mentioned before, and then they would pump this salted water out and run it through the tubes that you saw before, and there's a picture on it here that is Exhibit 227. These are, let's call them, these are referred to many times as titanium tubes, but they're the electrolysis tubes, and we can call them that way as well. So the water is pumped in, and electrical energy is applied onto each of these two tubes. And the diagram just shows one tube, but we're two tubes of them. And these are pictures from the facility. The one on top is Exhibit 229. That is the power meter that was used to generate the power to apply to the tubes. And Exhibit 230 shows these cables and these clamps. And so those, I presume those are the ones that were attached to the tubes to apply that power to the tubes. They're very much like you apply them to a car battery. And so the water goes into the tubes, the power is applied, the tubes have a membrane in the middle, and what happens is it splits the product into a highly positive water and highly negative water. The positive water is discarded and basically down the drain, and they take that negative water and collect it into the tank 2 that you see up on the right-hand side in step 1. So that's half the amount that they fed through the tubes, because half went as positive and the other half went as negative. Then we go to step 2, so they take that 150 gallon of water that is negative, and they run the process again through the tubes a second time. So they apply the power again and generate a more negative water and some positive water. And they throw away the positive water and end up with the basically doubly negative water, and that's now half the 150, and that's 75 gallons. So we went from 300 gallons of regular water, split it in half between positive and negative, 150 gallon negative, then we split it again in half and got 75 gallons of highly negative water.
Dr. Najm, I'm sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to ask you on this process. With respect to these titanium tubes, are these common devices used to manufacture bottled water meant for human consumption?
I will say I have never seen these tubes before, and I do not know if anyone who has used them in bottled or municipal application.
Thank you.
So now at the end of step 2, what we have is 75 gallons, and we call it negative water in there for that reason. This is the highly negative water that was generated by running the water through these electrolysis tubes 2 times. And then taking that negative water, now 75 gallons, they would go to prepare the concentrate. And the concentrate was also tap water that was filtered, so we'll take the purified water, they fill them in the tank in the step 3, that's 300 gallons, and they would add 2.5 gallons of the negative water that they just generated. So 2.5 gallons of the negative water and put it in these 300 gallons, and to that they would add salts as well as the third item there, which is potassium hydroxide, and that is basically a caustic chemical. It's used to raise the alkalinity and raise the pH of the water as part of water chemistry. And what you see on the right is the tank that is Exhibit 231, and that is, you'll see the writing on it says potassium hydroxide. And this is the chemical that was used to generate that concentrate, and as you can see from the sign, it is a highly corrosive chemical. It's a chemical you don't want to have on your hands, or certainly not in your face or in your eyes. And that is what they use to generate that concentrate. And to handle that, they certainly needed to use protective gear, protective equipment. You see Exhibit 226, that is the face mask that was used because these chemicals generate fumes, and the fumes are harmful to breathe, so you've got to be careful handling them. And Exhibit 225 shows the gloves that are used to be able to handle these chemicals. So certainly that is the appropriate protective gear for handling those chemicals. But ultimately that generated the concentrate that was either sold as a concentrate or was then used to generate product. And so we step to step 4, and from there they would take somewhere between 2 to 2.5 gallons of the concentrate and mix them with purified water again to generate the product that they have. And in that product, they also added some more salts and the hydroxide caustic chemical to reach the target chemistry that they wanted to reach. On the right, you see tanks, Exhibit 235. These are also tanks of product water, as I understand them, and they had a sample tap on that, and they would take a sample of the water and put it in a cup, and you see Exhibit 221. It's a little what they call ORP meter. You take that little probe, that blue probe, stick it in, and you measure how negative that water is. And they had a target range of how negative they wanted it to be. They had it between negative 225 to negative 300 millivolts. And If it's outside that range, then they would, if it's too low, they would add more concentrate to get it to that range. And the caustic was added also because they had a target pH for that product water. So if the pH is too low, they would add more caustic to bring that pH back up. And that final tank is what the product water is and how it was, this is the process of how it was generated.
So let's get back to our first question. After reviewing the manufacturing process, did you develop an opinion regarding how the hydrazine was formed in the E2 concentrate?
Yes, I did.
And what is your opinion on how the hydrazine was formed?
Can I go to the next slide? This is a complex slide that I generated as well. But basically, the essence of it is this. What you see here is a battery, which is what you have inside of each of those tubes. You have a power applied to create one negative side, one positive side. Okay? And a lot of chemical reactions happen on the positive side, and chemical reactions happen on the negative side. On the negative side is where the hydrazine gets formed. And there is, I can't point to it from here, that reaction on that negative that we call the cathode. But basically that negative side is where the nitrogen gets consumed and converted down to hydrazine, and that's the N2H4 that you see in that product there.
And is this, where is the nitrogen coming from?
Contrary to what the common perception is, pure water is not just H2O. There is nitrogen in the atmosphere. In fact, the atmosphere is 80% nitrogen, the specific 79%. Whenever water is open to the air, all the gases that are in the air dissolve in the water. So nitrogen gas is very much part of any pure water that is open to the atmosphere. And my perception of it is that when I look around and try to explain that chemistry, nitrogen gas as the source of the nitrogen appears to me as the most plausible place where that nitrogen may have come into the water. And remember, they had these tanks sitting and they ran it through the tubes, and you saw how small the tubes are. So it took a long time for that water to go through the tubes. And all that time, nitrogen can dissolve from the air into the water on the first run and then on the second run. So from my perspective, that is the most plausible explanation of where the nitrogen came from.
Is there any other explanation that you need with respect to this slide?
There is a second possible explanation, and that is, especially was the main topic of the research that I was working on, which is the fact that chlorine and ammonia can combine to form hydrazine. Now, where would the chlorine come from? Where would the ammonia come from? On the positive side, chlorine is generated. And when that chlorine is generated, it can migrate to the other side, to the negative side. And on the negative side, you also see a reaction, the second one down, if you go down that red column, where nitrogen, also from the air, that N2, because of the very negative power applied, can generate ammonia, and that's NH3. And so there's a possibility for ammonia to form in this device and for chlorine to form in this device. And to the extent that those two chemicals may have met inside the tubes, they would also generate hydrazine.
So we're looking at two different plausible chemical reactions that occurred within the titanium tubes. Is that right?
That is correct.
Whether it's one or the other of those chemical reactions, is it your opinion that the hydrazine was formed in the E2 concentrate through this electrolysis process in the titanium tubes?
In my opinion, that is the one place that hydrazine would have formed, yes.
You mentioned earlier the FDA testing results. Let's take a look at those. Okay. Can you please, we're looking at Exhibit 6, page 9 here. Can you tell the jury what we're looking at, Dr. Najm?
This is a report, a summary report, as it's titled, that the FDA generated when they were analyzing samples that they collected. And this is specifically referring to the E2 component, which is the concentrate. And they received a sample on March 30th, 2021. And the date out of lab, I'm assuming that means that's when the lab generated the report on the outcome of it, would be in October 2021. And it is that this is the report that showed that hydrazine, as you see the highlights, hydrazine identified based on retention time and whatever, but it's the concentration of hydrazine was determined to be 1.33 milligram per milliliter. Now, that really, you hear sometimes milligrams per liter or parts per million. That number is 1,330 parts per million or milligram per liter. And that's one of the 3 samples that were analyzed, and that is the hydrazine concentration that they reported on.
And what scientific instrument did the FDA use to test the concentrate for hydrazine?
You see the abbreviation in the first line, it's GC-MS. Basically, it's called a gas chromatograph and a mass spectrometer. It's an analytical instrument, or actually 2 instruments that are set up that are used to, you run a sample through them and it breaks it down to all the different pieces, different chemicals that are in there, and allows you to try to identify what each of those chemicals is.
Okay, if we could go to the next slide, which is page 6 of Exhibit 5. Dr. Najm, can you tell the jury what we're looking at here?
Yes, this is also the FDA report on the 2 other samples of concentrate that were collected, and they show the concentration of hydrazine that was measured in each. The first one was 1.44, again, milligram per milligram, that's 1,440 parts per million. And the second sample as well was 1.75 milligram per milliliter, which is 1,750 parts per million.
And again, for this test, was it the same scientific instrument as the other one we just looked at?
Yes, a GC-MS.
And when it says at the last line, the non-targeted screening using GC-MS was negative for all other samples tested, what does that mean?
That means they ran the same analysis on the other samples that the FDA tested, and they were negative for hydrazine in those samples.
And when was this test report?
It is dated October 20th, 2021.
And how long, do you know how long after the samples well, strike that. Are you aware of any samples of E2 concentrate that the FDA tested that did not test positive for hydrazine?
From the documents that I read, the FDA collected and analyzed 3 E2 concentrates, and those are the 3 that were reported with the hydrazine levels that we just discussed. I'm not aware that they collected and or analyzed other concentrate samples for hydrazine.
Every sample that the FDA tested for hydrazine detected hydrazine, correct?
Every sample that I've seen a report on detected hydrazine, yes.
And as part of the testing, the FDA tested many other samples of non-product matters, such as the chemicals they were using to put in to the concentrate and make the water. Is that right?
There was a long list of samples that they analyzed. I don't remember the specifics of those.
Okay. And the concentrates that we looked at, the concentrations that we looked at, 1.33, 1.44, and 1.75, are those significant?
They are very significant. These are surprisingly high concentrations of hydrazine to be present in a water production.
And if these are the concentrations at the time of the testing in October 2021, do you know when the samples that were tested were originally produced?
I do not know.
You know, we looked at the collection dates, did we not?
I'm assuming that is the collection date when FDA collected that bottle or that concentrate sample from the market. I don't know if that's the date that concentrate was actually produced.
Is it your understanding that the testing was done many, many months after the concentrate would have been produced?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you review the collection date?
I do not recall the collection date.
Can we please pull up Exhibit 5? Oh, actually, I'm sorry, it's on here. Shane, we can go back to that slide. If we can go back one more, please. This is Exhibit 6. And under the sample, it says date received March 30th, 2021. See that?
Correct.
So the date that the sample was received was March 20th, or March 30th, 2021, correct?
Correct.
And it was, the date out of the lab is more than 6 months later in October 2021, right?
That is correct.
And do you know how long before the sample was collected that it was produced?
I do not know.
So at least 6 months is, the testing was done at least 6 months after the sample was collected, right?
Based on this report, that is a reasonable statement.
And then some additional time longer because it had to have been produced sometime before it was collected.
Sometime before, yes.
So that brings us to question 2. Could the hydrazine concentration in the E2 concentrate have been higher at the time of production compared to the concentrations measured by the FDA in the samples analyzed? Do you have an opinion regarding question 2?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
from my knowledge of hydrazine chemistry, hydrazine is not a stable chemical. It degrades over time. And so from the minute you produce it in the water, as you hold that water, it'll decrease in concentration because it is not a stable chemical. And so whatever was measured today in a sample would have been higher several days before and certainly higher several months before. I can't tell you how much higher, but it would not be what you measured it today.
And why is it not possible to quantify the rate of hydrazine degradation?
Hydrazine chemistry is complex and it's affected by a lot of factors. I would merely be speculating, and I don't want to speculate. So I cannot predict what that level is.
Although you cannot predict a precise level, are you able to have a general understanding of how much higher it possibly could have been, given the timeframes that we're looking at and the conditions we're looking at?
Yes, it would not surprise me if the concentration several months before was 2 times, 3 times, or even 10 times that concentration. That would not be a surprising finding.
Okay, question 3. Based on the stability of hydrazine in water, would testing the finished product water for hydrazine months or years after its production be a reliable measure of hydrazine's detectable presence or concentration at the time of production and/or consumption? Did you develop an opinion on this question?
Yes, I did.
What is that?
As I was mentioning earlier, the chemical degrades over time. So if you put a bottle that has hydrazine in it and you put it on the shelf over months or years, that chemical will continue to degrade. It is possible that you get to a point where you can't even measure it anymore, even though it was in the water before. And so to say that if I analyze, let me take a bottle 2 years later and analyze it for hydrazine and say, look, there's no hydrazine in it, that would not be meaningful, because what matters is how much hydrazine was in it when it was produced. And several years later, we'd expect it to be significantly lower, if even present anymore at all.
Shane, if we could go to the next slide. The next slide is
Objection, Your Honor.
Can you take that down, counsel? Can you all approach, please? Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. We gave you that extra few seconds of white noise because we knew you wanted it. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do, rather than continue to have a discussion at Ben's, we're going to have you go out on a break. And so ladies and gentlemen, anticipate 10 to 15 minute recess. I better say 10 minutes and then have the marshal check on you. It's only 10 minutes, okay? So ladies and gentlemen, during this recess, you're admonished not to talk and converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the trial. You may not read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial or any person or entity connected with the trial by any medium of information, including without limitation, social media, text, tweets, newspapers, television, internet, radio. Anything I'm not saying specifically is also included. Do not visit the scene of the events mentioned during the trial. Do not undertake any research, experimentation, or investigation. Do not do any posting or communications on any social networking sites or anywhere else. Do not do any independent research, including but not limited to internet searches. And of course, do not confirm, form, or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial in any manner whatsoever until the case is fully and finally submitted to the time of jury deliberations. Thank you so very much.
All rise.
Okay. Do the parties wish the witness to be excused during the oral argument or remain in the courtroom during the oral argument?
Please excuse, Your Honor, on behalf of
Yeah, on behalf of the ATT, if it's our turn, we would ask that he be excused.
Okay.
No objection.
Okay, so witness can be excused, you understand you're still in the midst of your testimony, and he's already been admonished as far as not speaking with the jurors in any manner whatsoever.
Don't speak with the jurors, by the way.
Okay, perfectly. Feel free to watch your step on your way down. Thank you so very much. Okay. Give 1 second for the witness to exit, and then I will let counsel for ET&T to raise the objection. So let you set forth your objection, and then we'll see who wishes to respond to said objection. Counsel for ET&T, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Valerie Rojas for ETT. I objected based upon relevance and prejudice because we're about to get into the Eurofins testing. Your Honor may recall we had a motion in limine number 19 to exclude Eurofins and FDA tests of water samples manufactured in 2020 and later. That motion was denied without prejudice. I understand why we're allowing the FDA, or we are now allowing the FDA testing because that's part of the 2020 outbreak and that investigation. However, with respect to the Eurofins testing, that originated from tests during litigation conducted by UNFI from retail bottles stored in UNFI's warehouse, not Nevada Beverage. Those bottles were manufactured in 2020 and 2021. The only retail defendant in this case is ETT, and that's with respect to Mr. Hunwardsen's claims. Mr. Hunwardsen had a liver transplant in September of 2019 and stopped consuming real water in December of 2019. Therefore, a testing of real water retail bottles from UNFI would be irrelevant and highly prejudicial to Terrible Herbst. Terrible Herbst retail bottles have never been tested. There are no test results of those retail bottles. And what the prejudice is the jury is going to think that those same test results would apply to Terrible Herbst when in fact there are no test results of real water from Terrible Herbst.
How does that apply, as you can appreciate the person to ask this question, in light of rulings, including yesterday's ruling, how does that apply to what is ETT's, I'm going to just use a generic term, status, so nobody has any viewpoints, I used it any other way, okay, in the case.
Well, this
the claims and defenses that ETT is participating in, however you'd like to phrase it.
Right, I understand that we're still defending on punitive damages, and what the Eurofins test results seem to suggest is that ETT should somehow have had notice or should have conducted similar testing. And as to notice, that's simply irrelevant. What happens in 2020 and 2021 in terms of manufacturing is irrelevant to the bottles that Terrible Herbst would have sold to Mr. Hunwardsen, which would have been at least manufactured no later than 2019. Terrible Herbst is still entitled to defend itself on the punitive damages claim, and especially with respect to notice. So any evidence, such as customer complaints, etc.
We're not going there yet, right?
Right, I understand.
This is a
I'll just
question.
stick with this result then.
Thank you, please. And you understand why the court said it, because that's not the pending objection for the pending question.
Absolutely, yes, Your Honor, I apologize for that. So just with respect to the Eurofins testing, that would not be notice to ETT. That would be prejudicial to ETT. It would confuse the issues as to, we would have to go through who UNFI is, where the bottles came from, all for nothing, because they are not similar in any way to the retail bottles that would have been sold in 2019. They weren't stored in the same place. We just heard this witness talk about degradation over a period of time, although we don't know what period of time. So for those reasons, Your Honor, we would ask that all the Eurofins test results be excluded, not just for this witness, but for anyone.
Well, that's different. Remember, in the course of trial, I had to deal with objections, question by question, motions eliminated with the opportunity to do motions eliminated. Understood, making rulings. So, dealing with the last question. So, Real Water, do you have anything, position on this?
Your Honor, Real Water doesn't have a position.
Okay, that means I now go to Mr. Pepperman on behalf of plaintiff. Mr. Pepperman, go ahead, please.
That's Your Honor, the objection is relevance,
And prejudicial, too.
and I always treat those two as the same, but there's no objection to the foundation of the testing or that their business records of Eurofins. All that is acknowledged. It's just a simple question of is it relevant or unduly prejudicial. And the whole argument about it being irrelevant and prejudicial, it totally related to compensatory damages by saying, oh, they're going to think our water has hydrazine in it because the test results on bottles that were held by Eurofins. While we've maintained there's no difference, it's in the retail bottles, that is still a compensatory damages issue that they're concerned about, which is, it's not a concern. The relevance of this, of the Eurofins testing is punitive damages, primarily related to Real Water, who's not objecting to this exhibit. The fact that they tested retail bottles and found hydrazine in it when they did is relevant to show that at any time they could have sent out these bottles for testing and would have been able to determine a wide variety of constituents in there, including hydrazine. So it's relevant on that simple basis alone, and it's not unduly prejudicial because any argument made by counsel is related to compensatory damages, which is not a matter of issue.
Okay. Well, the court disagrees but has a potential resolution because I have two defendants in this case. Okay. And what the court disagrees is, remember, it's not just relevant to the case, it has to be relevant actually to the party who's raising the objection. And the way that that's phrased is, well, Real Water did not object, Terrible Herbst did. And Terrible Herbst, and since there was not, and I appreciate this is a question by question, but there is nothing that has been stated that this is relating to, for the 5 plaintiffs, not relating to Terrible Herbst, etc. So, the question as phrased and having the document up there raises 2 separate issues. We all would agree that if it was stipulated that documents could come in, if not, you have to, right, standard rules of evidence, you gotta lay a foundation. They don't have to object on foundation, you can't put a document up there anyway, you know that, unless, okay, it was stipulated. I appreciate there was, the court's not saying there was something negative because you had an understanding, you thought it was stipulated, and ETT says it's not. Nobody's presented anything to this court one way or another, so I have to go it's not, realistically, right? Unless somebody could show me an email or something that shows it is. Nobody has at this juncture. So, issue 1, with regards to documents, document can't come up as with any other document, either if it's pre-admitted by court ruling, stipulated by the parties. If not, you need to follow the process, or you have to have an agreement before that document comes up that somebody lets the court know that you have some agreement that you didn't have before. With regards to the actual objection of the question, the court has to sustain the objection. It is not relevant for ETT's purposes and or is more prejudicial. And the reason why the court is going to say that is because there was no qualification that would say that that is as to testing of general bottles, but carving out, and this goes in light of your prior questions that you asked of the specific witness, right, with the degradation and everything like that. Those were general questions about all the processes and all the bottled waters. I have to take his testimony so far, right, he doesn't know when certain things were produced to the FDA, etc. So that all is in a general sense. This question falls as phrased, you know, did a nice job, a nice transition, but it seems to be still phrased in the general sense that it would apply to all defendants. Whereas by the punitive damages, when you go into conscious disregard, etc., and the testing aspect, and particularly if you're saying the testing is who the testing is done by, gives an implication to the jury that ETT didn't do the test, or maybe that they would be subject to the test, etc. So the court has to look at all of that, and the court has to sustain the objection. Now, where what the court was saying for potential curative is you might be able to come to some agreement with ET&T, maybe all parties, that you're making it clear. And by the way, it also violates a different motion limine, right, with regards to settled parties and referencing things that were done by settled parties. That's your, so that presents an independent challenge. And remember, the court has to go to law the case. So that being said, you might have a potential resolution that you can come to an agreement that with regards to the question is not saying that those were bottles that were at Terrible Herbst, etc. The court's not requiring, I'm just saying, I see, since this is an objection in the course of trial, I have to treat it as an objection in the course of trial. I just hearing the nature of the objection, that's different than the motion eliminate. The motion eliminate was focused more on compensatory damages. The objection made by Ms. Rojas today does focus and does tie into the punitive damages this court finds with the way that question was asked in context with the prior questions. And so I have to see abstain that specific objection. Remember, these are question by question sustaining, but if you are thinking of going down that path, since we're going to be having lunch relatively soon, maybe you all come to some agreement when you come back from lunch. Now,
There's no agreement to be had here.
I always have rosy colored glasses. I hear you, Mr. Kemp, but you have to realize, always have rosy colored glasses, so sometimes things might, because remember, the objection is unique to ETT. The court has to make the ruling with regards to ETT with the way that question was phrased, okay?
Can we continue with the witness in other areas? So he's not
This is a
tight
question by question, yeah, as you know. The court's sustaining a specific objection raised to the last question and the putting up of a document that had not been stipulated or pre-admitted. That's the court's ruling, okay? It's not saying at this juncture that this is a broader scope one. So, counsel, do you wish the jury to come back in and utilize about 10 more minutes and then send them out for lunch? Is that what you're requesting?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, then we will do so. Marshall, can you bring them back in, please? It wasn't, we didn't even get a. I'm sorry. Counsel, what was the proposed exhibit number that you referenced? Was it 7?
Exhibit 7.
Right now it's proposed 7, right? It was not stipulated to?
I,
You think that there's documentation showing it's stipulated to?
we discussed it, and I must have misunderstood. But I'm not saying that it was stipulated, I misunderstood that, it was my mistake.
Well, I'm just going as Madam Clerk needs to know when you reference a document, right? Whether she needs to call it. Feel free to bring the jury and just poke your head in beforehand, please.
Do you want the witness back in here?
Oh, yes, yes, please.
Yes, fine.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marshall.
Yeah, it's exhibit, proposed exhibit 7.
That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
The court just asked me whether or not, what is the court's, at this juncture, in the absence of providing me something that there was a stipulation, I have to treat it as a proposed exhibit.
Sounds great, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think the exhibit list I gave you indicates it was stipulated, that's,
That's why no one raised on this end, but at this juncture, I said, if you show something, then let the court know. But right now, I have 2 different viewpoints, and I don't have anything in writing saying it was stipulated, so I have to, nothing in open court, so I have to treat it as proposed. Okay, before the jury comes in, does this witness need to be told anything that all parties are being, the witness needs to be told, or should we just bring the jury in?
I think just bring it in. I think we.
Okay, whoever is, folks, hold on, Marshall, just 1 second. Can you close the door for 1 quick second? Marshall?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you just close the door for 1 quick second?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, so whichever is the final decision at that table, please let the court know, because you have to show her outside the door.
So, Your Honor, we're ready to bring the jury in. Really? Here?
yes.
Okay,
You good?
thank you so very much. Yes, and you understand it's about 10 minutes to 12 minutes at a good stopping point. Okay, thank you so much.
All rise for the presence of the jury.
Appreciate it, thank you so much. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the jury, outside the presence of the court sustaining the objection, that means the jury will disregard the question the witness didn't answer, so I don't have to remind you to disregard that. And counsel, feel free to move forward with your next question. Thank you so much.
Dr. Najm, in your review, did you review testing done on retail bottles belonging to real water that weren't being distributed to Terrible Herbst?
Objection, irrelevant, unduly prejudicial.
Overruled the way that question was phrased.
I did review testing results of water samples. I don't know if they are relevant to the defendant or not.
You knew those retail bottles were from the manufacturer, not Terrible Herbst, correct?
Objection, meeting.
Also,
Stay.
objection, post speculation.
Okay, so sustained on both independent grounds.
Can I just show him Exhibit 7?
Counsel? Would you all like to approach for a brief moment? Okay.
Your Honor, I'll withdraw the last question.
Okay, no worries, so then the court need no rule, thank you so very much. Go ahead, please, feel free to come forward with the next question.
Dr. Najm, did you review test results of retail bottles from the manufacturer?
Yes, I did.
Did you rely on those test results of retail bottles from the manufacturer of real water in formulating your opinions in this case?
I reviewed those results after I issued my expert report, so that was not part of the analysis that I did.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Najm, does hydrazine have a smell?
Hydrazine as a chemical, yes, has a smell.
And what is that smell?
It has a fishy or sort of ammonia type smell.
What does hydrazine look like in water?
It can look in different ways, but at high enough concentrations, it could start forming a sheen layer or an oily layer on the surface of the water.
Earlier, we looked at the scientific instrument used as part of the FDA testing.
Wait, please don't put anything up unless specifically requested. Thank you.
Is that well, strike that. In your studies, the 2 papers that you published regarding hydrazine formation in water, what scientific instruments did you use to measure the hydrazine?
The lab we were working with also used the same instrument, the GCMS type instrument.
And you mentioned the lab that you were working with. Did as part of your studies, did you send the samples out for a lab to do independent testing with that equipment?
It was a research team, a research project, so we had partnered with a lab to do the hydrazine analysis out of the research work.
Someone like a bottled water company, or real water, wanted to send a sample to a lab to run through those GCMS instruments. Is that possible?
These are available analyses from commercial laboratories, yes.
And as part of that testing, could Real Water have sent out samples of its water to test for a wide variety of different potential constituents in its product?
They certainly could have.
And do you know approximately how much the cost would be for testing like that?
It all depends on what you ask the lab to investigate and what you ask them to do. It could be a few hundreds, it could be a few thousands.
Either way, if the few thousand cost for the test, is that going to test for a wide variety of constituents?
Objection calls for speculation and vague as to time.
Sustained.
Based on your work in the hydrazine papers and using labs with this similar equipment, do you have an understanding of whether the equipment can test for a wide variety of constituents in the water?
Very much so, and I would also add that that is how the FDA approached the analysis that they did. They ran it through the instrument and analyzed for a broad range of constituents, and that's when they found the hydrazine.
And if Real Water had wanted to, could they have sent out samples for laboratory testing similar to the testing that was done by the FDA?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Do laboratories provide those services to product manufacturers if requested?
To my understanding, yes, there are laboratories that provide that type of service.
And in your review of all the materials in this case, did you see any documentation in which Real Water sent out samples for analysis using equipment such as the GCMS?
None that I saw.
Your Honor, I know we have a hard stop time.
Just gonna break time for lunch?
I think so, yes, Your Honor.
Okay, perfect. Then we're gonna ask everyone to come back at 1:15, ladies and gentlemen. A nice lovely recess admonishment during your lunch hour. During this lunch recess, you are admonished not to talk or converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the trial, the voir dire process. You may not read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial voir dire process or any person or entity connected with the trial voir dire process by any medium of information, including without limitation, social media, text, tweets, newspapers, television, internet, radio. Anything I've not stated specifically is also included. Do not visibly senior the events mentioned during the trial voir dire process. Do not undertake any research, experimentation, or investigation. Do not do any posting or communications on any social networking sites or anywhere else, or do any independent research, including but not limited to internet searches. And of course, do not form or express any opinion on any subject connected to the case till it's fully and finally submitted to the time of jury deliberations. With that, we wish you a nice and relaxing lunch. Thank you so very much.
All rise.
Just a second, can we hear the door quick? Okay. Wish everyone a nice and relaxing lunch. Thank you so very much. We're going to have the jury come back, so if you come back 2 minutes before, just so you can get set up, would be great. Witness, feel free to watch your step on your way down from the stand. Thank you so very much, everyone. I just was asking because we see there's one new person. Does anyone need to do anything else? Is it your transcriber?
I already told them.
Okay. We told everyone that we have a new counsel. Counsel, are you just observing or are you making an appearance?
Making an appearance, in fact, on our notice of appearance, I was the first name, Dan Polsenberg for ETT.
Yeah, no worries, just need to make sure our transcribers are doing this on a daily basis, so they need to know which attorneys are here. Okay, and that's the only other new counsel. Okay, counsels, any issues before we bring the jury back in on behalf of plaintiffs?
No, Your Honor.
Any issues that Real Water needs the court to address?
None, Your Honor.
Any issues that ETT needs the court to address?
None, Your Honor.
Okay, then Marshall, can we go get our computer panel and we can start to have them in? Do appreciate it.
It's good.
Do you want the witness back on the stand? Parties, do you want the witness of the time?
Sure, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Marshall, appreciate it. Was there any resolution on whether that was a proposed exhibit or that was a stipulated exhibit we're referencing number 7, or is it?
Shockingly, no.
Like I said, I have rosy-colored glasses. I always am an eternal optimist, so witness is coming back to the stand. The protocol has been, as we stated, that we just remind a witness that they're still under oath. Are you all okay with that, or is anyone requesting that the witness be re-sworn in? Counsels for plaintiff, your position.
We're okay with
Reminding. Real Water, what's your position, please? Okay, and ETT,
You're okay with it?
reminding?
Yeah.
Okay, sure, no worries. Okay, so you understand that what that means is the translated version is instead of being resworn in at each and every break, the parties are in agreement that I can just remind you that you're still under oath. So do you understand you're still under oath even though we had a lunch break?
I do.
Okay, thanks very much. The jury should be coming in just a moment. Councils, for our next, when we take our afternoon break, there's going to be one issue that the court's going to need to address with you all outside the presence, okay? Do you want the heads up of what I'm going to be addressing?
Sure.
Okay, what I'm going to be addressing is document 1092, which is the order on ET&T's motion limiting number 14. 1092 is my recollection of the document number. I just give you the document number, and that's the order that's dated 1/11/2024, but there's a lot of orders on that day, so I was trying to give you the order name as well as the document number.
You said 1,002, Your Honor?
1092, 1092. It was the order regarding AT&T's motion limiting number 14. Okay, no worries.
You know, one other thing, I forgot, Ms. Switzler is here making an appearance.
Mr. Parker?
Pardon?
Yeah.
We need somebody to come to a microphone. You want somebody else to make an appearance? Is that what
Yes,
you
Your
said?
Honor.
Okay, no worries. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Brianna Switzler, bar number 15653.
Okay. Same thing.
That's it.
Welcome.
Thank you.
But if she's going to be speaking, then we need to put her near a microphone.
I'll just be,
Hold on a second. Thank you.
I'll just be taking one of the witnesses, Your Honor, so I'll just.
Oh, you're come up for it. Okay, no worries. It's the same thing. We just need to make sure everyone is up to be heard. That's just what we're trying to do. You got a chance. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Marshall, we are ready for our.
All rise for the presence of the jury. Be seated.
Appreciate it. Thank you so very much, Marshall. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you're enjoying our wonderful culinary scene here in the downtown area. So with that, without further ado, as you recall before the lunch break, we had the same witness on the stand. The witness just got reminded, as we do, we don't really swear in a witness each and every break. We just remind them that they're still under oath. The witness has been reminded. If you remember, we were in direct examination by counsels for plaintiffs. So counsel, feel free to continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Najm, I just have a few final questions for you. Is the GCMS instrument at the FDA lab the only one of these machines in the country?
I am confident it is not.
Based on your personal experience, do most universities have these types of machines?
Many universities that do work in chemicals have these machines.
And based on your personal experiences, do most private labs have them?
Also speculation.
Sustain. Or how broad that question was phrased. Okay.
Are there private labs that you've worked with in the past that provide different types of chemical testing services?
Yes, there are many labs that provide those services.
Could you name a few that you're aware of as examples?
WEC Laboratories does these analyses. Eurofins Laboratories do these analyses. Babcock Laboratories, these are California laboratories that I'm familiar with.
And are these laboratories located in other states, to your knowledge?
Yes, for sure.
And when you say these analyses, are you referring to analyses with the GCMS instrument?
Yes, I am.
Based on your personal experiences, are these GCMS instruments widely available?
Objection, vague, also speculation.
One of the witnesses probably just my sustained number of records.
Based on your personal experiences, are testing services with these types of GCMS instruments available from multiple different laboratories to anyone who wants to utilize them?
They are available to clients to send samples and do analyses, yes.
And when you refer to clients, does that include anyone who wants to utilize these types of testing services?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
What did you mean when you said clients?
Laboratories are businesses. They have clients that pay them for services. That's what I meant by that. Commercial laboratories do analyses for all kinds of entities, whether municipalities, private companies. They don't necessarily do analyses for individuals, but they do business with other businesses.
So based on your personal experiences, any type of business who wanted to perform testing services with instruments like the GCMS, there would be multiple options available to that business.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Najm. Those are all the questions I have for you. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Okay, so for cross-examination, counsel for real water, would you like to continue cross-examination?
Dr. Najm, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Mark Love, and I represent Real Water. In this case, I'm just going to ask you a few questions. Doctor, your background is in civil engineering, is that right?
Environmental engineering.
I see. Do you have any degrees in chemistry?
I do not.
Now, I understand you have some experience working with hydrazine. Have you consulted with any entity in the food and beverage industry?
I had done consulting in the past with food and beverage industry, yes.
And did that relate to hydrazine or something else?
It was not related to hydrazine.
At what point is there enough hydrazine in water for you to be able to see it? From your look, it sounds like you don't understand my question.
I don't understand.
I'll withdraw it and re-ask it. You had mentioned in response to Mr. Pepperman's questions that you could see it in water, it formed, and I don't want to misstate what you said, but it's like an oily surface. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
Okay. At what concentration do you have to get to for the hydrazine to be visible to the naked eye?
I do not have that number.
And we went through the three things you were tasked with doing in this case, and as part of your work in this matter, did you go out to the Real Water facility?
No, I did not.
Did you personally inspect any of the equipment at Real Water?
No, I did not.
Was any of the equipment provided to you for inspection in your lab?
No, it was not.
Have you personally spoken with any of the Real Water people that were involved in the production of the concentrate?
I have not.
Now, as we were running through those steps with your very well-made diagram, I recall there was an initial step where they purified the water before beginning the concentrate process. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. One of the steps Real Water used was activated carbon. Can you explain to me what the purpose of that is?
Yes, activated carbon is similar to the charcoal that some people have as filters in their refrigerators or under the sink. And that's what that material is.
So it's like a filtration process?
It is a filtration process that is made to remove certain things from water.
Okay. And one of the things they used was something called UV disinfection. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
And what is that?
It is basically a disinfection process. If you shine ultraviolet light on water, if there are organisms or bacteria in that water, they will get disinfected.
Okay. And they also did something called reverse osmosis. Are you familiar with reverse osmosis?
Yes, I am.
And what is that?
You're basically squeezing water through a very thin membrane to remove as much as you can from it.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, you were brought in, you had like step one to assess how the hydrazine could have gotten in the real water product. Is that fair?
That was one of the questions that was asked. Yes.
And when you did that assessment, as I understand from reading your report, you came up with two hypotheses of how that could have happened, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I'll just call them hypothesis 1 and 2. Hypothesis 1, as I understand it, I just want to make sure we're talking and using the same terms. As I understand it, is that the nitrogen from room air was soluble in the water, and then during the electrolysis process was fixed, or the nitrogen-nitrogen bonds were broken and hydrogen was added. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment.
Okay. And then, as I understand hypothesis 2, it involved the reaction of ammonia and a chlorine-based substance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I think that, was it any chlorine-based substance, or was chloramine specific?
It is actually chlorine itself.
Chlorine itself, okay, thank you. And in any of the testing on the real water product, was any ammonia found in the water?
Not that I know.
Was any chloramine found in the water?
Let me answer this question and revise my answer to the previous question.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any analysis made about ammonia or chloramine.
Okay, fair enough. So it would be fair to say then that there's no evidence that you have seen indicating that there was any chloramine or ammonia in the water?
The only evidence I have from the documents that I have reviewed is that there was mention about chlorine odor forming as they were experimenting with how to make this real water product. That's as far as it goes.
All right. Let's focus on pathway 1. Are you familiar with any situations in the history of your work regarding hydrazine in which electrolysis in water at normal room temperature resulted in nitrogen being converted to hydrazine?
I have not seen data on that, no.
Do you believe that the higher the voltage that was used in this process, the more hydrazine would have been produced?
The voltage plays a role in how much hydrazine is formed.
Okay, and what is that role?
I would expect if the voltage increases, there will be more formation of hydrazine, but I cannot tell you how much more or if that increase would be significant.
Can you, based on the concentrate formation chart that you created and the pathways that you discussed, are you able to provide us some estimate of the rate of hydrazine production from this process?
No, I'm not able to.
Real water added a number of compounds into the water as part of the concentrate making process. And several of them were mineral salts, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And what is a salt?
A salt is a salt. A salt is a combination of chemicals, just like table salt is sodium chloride. They were adding potassium chloride, so it is like table salt.
Okay. But fair to say a salt, and again, I understand that you're an environmental engineer, not a chemist, but is it fair to say that a salt is simply an inorganic compound that's got a cation and an anion, like a positive and negative ion together?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. They also, you mentioned earlier that they added the potassium hydroxide, and that's a base, correct?
That is correct.
And the addition of potassium hydroxide would have been to shift the pH up into the alkaline range?
Correct.
At the concentrations of the finished product with the potassium hydroxide they added, would there be any health concerns drinking water at an elevated pH?
Not at the pH of the product water.
Okay. Did any of the salts that they added play a role in the production of the hydrazine?
The salts are essential for the titanium tubes to work. So to the extent that I believe hydrazine formed in the titanium tubes, those salts that were in the water running through the tubes would have played a role.
Okay, when you say play a role, did they play a chemical role? I mean, were they actually involved in the reaction of breaking two nitrogen atoms apart and adding hydrogens to them?
They are important for the electrolysis to work.
So the role they played, just to make sure we're on the same page, so the role they played was simply to allow the electrical current to run through the water, right?
Which is part of the mechanism to form hydrazine.
Right. But that was, as you are understanding it, that was the role they played, right?
That is correct.
Okay. In your report, you only cited 3 articles. 2 of the articles were your own articles, and then the third item was Eckhart Schmidt's book from 2001, and that's the Eckhart Schmidt's English version of hydrazine and its derivatives, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. In Eckhart Schmidt's book, was there anything mentioned in that volume on creating hydrazine about using electrolysis and water to form hydrazine?
It's a 2-volume book. I do not recall the contents of the books.
Correct, but you cited it in your report. Did you cite it for any purpose on that specific subject?
I cited it as part of the chemical reactions that can result in hydrazine formation.
Fair enough. Do you recall anything in Eckhart Schmidt's book stating that you can form hydrazine in water using electrolysis?
As I mentioned, I do not recall the contents of the 2-volume book.
All right. And then you also cited your 2 articles. One was from 2006. It was formation of hydrazine as a chloramine byproduct, correct?
Correct.
And that was published by the Water Research Foundation that you were working for?
I was not working for them, but that is correct.
Is the Water Research Foundation journal, is that a peer-reviewed journal?
That is not a peer-reviewed report, no.
And that article was about the formation of hydrazine using chloramine, correct?
Chloramine is a product of ammonia and chlorine, so it was about that second mechanism of chlorine and ammonia forming hydrazine.
All right. And then you also have a 2011 article called Quantifying Hydrazine in Chloraminated Water, right?
Right.
And that article, that was also published by Water Research Foundation?
Correct.
And that article also related to chloraminated water, right?
It's related to the formation of hydrazine when chlorine and ammonia are contacted.
Correct. During your career as an expert dealing with hydrazine, have you ever heard of nitrogen from room air dissolving in water and then resulting in hydrazine being formed in the absence of chloramine or ammonia?
This was the first time I have looked at that in that context.
And so, I mean, I take it then, there's the sheer novelty of this, as you're looking at potential for pathway 1. Did you set up an experiment or some sort of like lab bench project to test that hypothesis?
No, I did not.
Did you do any testing at all to form your opinions here?
I did not do any testing.
Okay. Can you rule out the possibility that the hydrazine was added by a disgruntled employee just putting it in the water?
That's objection, Your Honor. Lacks foundation, vague, calls for speculation.
Overruled in light of this witness's prior testimony. Sorry, and designation, my voice went up for a second, sorry.
I mean, can you rule that out based on what you've seen?
Here's what I know. The water went into this process with no hydrazine. Came out of this process with hydrazine based on the FDA's results. I was trying to provide an explanation of where in this process that could have happened. That's what I did. And that's my analysis. And that's my view of where that may have happened.
Okay.
To the extent that you want to come up with other possibilities, go ahead, but those are not my possibilities.
Did you ever interview anybody with real water to assess any of the techniques used or who had access to the concentrate room, anything like that?
I did not.
I need you to pause for one quick second. Sorry, someone remote is not muting themselves and it's making noises which you're hearing. So whoever's on remote, please do ensure that you mute yourselves, because as you can appreciate, we're in the middle of trial. I want to make sure everyone gets a nice, clear record. Thank you so very much. Go ahead, Counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Pepperman asked you about the lab analysis done by, I think it was the FDA lab that they received in March, and then they returned a report in October. Do you remember that?
I do.
Do you have any information whatsoever as to what other testing the FDA did before they got to the October testing?
There are many reports from the FDA that I reviewed that included a number of analyses. I do not remember their specifics.
Okay. Is it fair to say there were a number of analyses and steps the FDA ran prior to getting to the October testing?
I don't know if it's prior to or after, that's all I know.
And you also talked about the final method they used when they actually found the hydrazine, and I believe that was a gas chromatograph and mass spec. Isn't that two different devices?
The method is two instruments connected together.
But it's basically two methods to analyze the properties of the material being studied?
It's one method, two instruments.
Two, okay, thank you. And do you know how many different chemicals can be found using the basic GCMS method?
Hundreds or thousands, I don't know the number.
Okay. Are you familiar with the CRC Handbook, Chemistry and Physics?
Yes, I am.
And the CRC Handbook is a reference used by chemists, correct?
It's used by a lot of people.
Right. And it's basically a reference guide that has the properties of various chemicals in it. Correct?
It's a dictionary of chemistry.
Right. Do you have any idea how many different chemicals are in the CRC?
I would not venture to guess.
Can we say oodles, thousands, hundreds of thousands?
You can say whatever you want.
I know, but what would your estimate be? I mean, certainly many thousands, right?
I would suspect, but I don't know.
Okay. Do you know how many chemicals are in the CRC that are not found using the basic GCMS method?
I do not know.
Okay. Do you keep up on the literature regarding hydrazine?
I don't know what you mean by keep up on the literature.
Okay, well, you know, it's a term often used by scientists. Do you make a point of reviewing the scientific literature as it comes out with regards to hydrazine?
I am not working on hydrazine right at this moment, so no, I'm not reviewing the literature.
Okay. So I noted that you cited your two chloramine articles from 2006 and 2011. Have there been other articles regarding hydrazine and hydrazine production that have come out in the scientific literature since then?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm not reviewing the literature at this time, so I can't answer your question.
Have you ever seen any literature or scientific article indicating that titanium is a potential catalyst in the formation of hydrazine from nitrogen?
Not that I recall.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness for recollection refreshed?
For sure, please teach the
Of
counsel.
course.
And then you may.
You just shut this down.
Your Honor, can we approach?
Of course you may. Can you please turn on some white noise?